Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamunatiravana Chari Yamunatiravana Chari Jaya Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Together Narayana Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Udirayet Nasta Praesva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Naktir Bhavati Nestiki Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadahamayam Dadati Swapadantakam Namaha Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Sri Mate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Te Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatharine Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupaswarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Saktikam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. This morning we will be discussing from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 26, verses 1 to 10. Before we begin our discussion of these verses, can anyone give us a brief recap of where we are, what's happening, what we discussed yesterday? The city of 9 gates. Yes. Anyone else? Anything else? We are discussing the conversation between Narad Muni and King Prachina Barhishat. Brahma's son is Swayambhuva Manu, and Swayambhuva's son is Maharaj Priyavrata, and we are talking about his dynasty. In his dynasty, there is this king called Prachina Barhishat, who is the father of Prachetas. We discussed about Prachetas who are performing long yajna underwater. They are devotees of the Lord. However, while the Prachetas are performing these austerities, their father, Prachina Barhishat, is engaged in sense gratification. He's engaged in fruitive activities. What is fruitive activity? Any materialistic activity aimed at achieving a certain result. Right? So he's engaged, Prachina Barhishat is engaged in these fruitive activities, and especially he was engaged in killing animals in the forest. He was hunting animals. And when a devotee sees this painful situation of someone being hurt, someone being in pain, they feel very hurt, they feel very compassionate. And Narad Muni, feeling compassion for these animals who were being killed, and also feeling compassion for the living entities, because he's a devotee, he cannot see people suffer and waste their time. So he came to King Prachina Barhishat in order to give him instructions, give him some guidance. And he did not do so directly, but he did so in the form of an allegorical story of Puranjana. So what does Puranjana represent? Does anyone remember? Who is Puranjana in this allegory? The body, the soul, the jiva. And we see that Narad Muni, Puranjana is basically, Narad Muni is addressing Prachina Barhishat, the king, in the form of this allegory of Puranjana, a living entity. And he's explaining how a living entity gets entangled in material life and loses his intelligence and forgets God. So, in the previous chapter, which is chapter 25, we saw that Puranjana was enamored by the city of 9 gates. What is the city of 9 gates? The body. Yes, the body has 9 holes, so the city of 9 gates is the human body. So Puranjana was going through different species of life, animals, insects, and while going through this journey, he comes across human body, and then he becomes so attached, so enamored by this beautiful human body, because there is so much sense gratification available. And then he sees a beautiful woman, and what does this woman represent? Intelligence, a material intelligence of the living entity. So Puranjana becomes so enamored by this lady, and he wants to marry this lady, and the lady is also looking for a husband. Prabhupada explains that intelligence cannot act independently, it needs consciousness. So they get together, and Puranjana becomes so deeply attached, captivated by this lady, that he completely follows everything that she does. And Prabhupada explains that in the purport of 425-25, yes, he becomes so attached, he becomes so captivated by his material intelligence in the form of this lady that he follows her everywhere, which means that us in this body, our position, what we do is we follow our material mind and intelligence blindly wherever they lead us. This object looks beautiful, this person looks amazing, this activity looks amazing, let me do that, unrestricted sense gratification. And that is what Puranjana did. He was following his wife, his material intelligence, and he fell into Maya, the trap of Maya. And Prabhupada explains this beautifully in the purport of 425-25. He says, it is said in the Prema Vivarta, which is a book, that when a living entity wants to enjoy material nature, this is very important, when the living entity wants to enjoy material nature, he is immediately victimized by the material energy. A living entity is not forced to come into the material world. Sometimes, even among devotees, there is this theory that we did not come by choice. We were forced to come into the material world. We were pushed out of the spiritual world by Krishna. So Prabhupada is being very clear. A living entity is never forced to come into the material world. He makes his own choice, being attracted by beautiful women, which means by Maya. Every living entity has the freedom to be attracted by material nature. Free will is always there. Or to stand as a hero and resist that attraction. It is simply a question of the living entities being attracted or not being attracted. There is no question of his being forced to come into contact with material energy. One who can keep himself steady and resist the attraction of material nature is certainly a hero and deserves to be called a Goswami. So, it is very, very clear from this purport that, and from the story of Puranjana also, that it is by choice that we choose to be attracted to the material energy. We have the choice to practice our free will, practice our restraint, and say no to the material attractions. But we choose to follow that. We choose to be attracted to that, to contemplate that, and to pursue material activity. So it is completely our responsibility, and it is completely our free will and our choice, active, conscious choice that we make. And therefore, Narad Muni is being so compassionate, and he's telling this to Prachina Barishat, that this is your choice, please don't do this, please act as a Goswami, practice self-restraint. Human life is not meant for this. So this was the summary of the previous chapter of what we discussed. Now beginning this chapter 26, we will read verse by verse from verses 1 by 10. We'll read the translations, and we will pause at 6 because that is the verse which we will expand on. So we can start reading from verse 1.
Hare Krishna. The great sage Narada continued, my dear king, once upon a time King Puranjana took up his great bow, and equipped with golden armor and a quiver of unlimited arrows, and accompanied by 11 commanders, he set on his chariot, driven by 5 swift horses, and went to the forest named Panchaprastha. He took with him in that chariot 2 explosive arrows. The chariot itself was situated on 2 wheels and 1 revolving axle. On the chariot were 3 flags, one rein, one chariot driver, one sitting place, two poles to which the harness was fixed, 5 weapons, and 7 coverings. The chariot moved in 5 different styles, and 5 obstacles lay before it. All the decorations of the chariot were made of gold.
In this was verse 1 to 3, verses 1 to 3. In this verse, we now see that Puranjana has become captivated by his wife, which means material intelligence. He's been captivated by Maya. Now he's getting on a chariot and he's going into the forest called Pancha Prastha for hunting. But all these metaphors that's given in this verse, we can break it down to understand what each of them means. So, again, Narad Muni basically in this verse is describing the position of the material body in, and the engagement of the living entity within it, how we are encaged within this body and in this world. So Puranjana again represents the living entity, the individual jiva, soul. The great bow and great armor that he's wearing and holding, that symbolizes the body's defense mechanisms and strength to engage in material activities, the great valour by which we perform material activities. The quiver of unlimited arrows that Puranjana has on his back represents the unlimited desires of the living entity. Unlimited desires for actions and sense gratification. The 11 commanders which are with Puranjana, they mean the 10 senses, which is the 5 knowledge acquiring senses and the 5 working senses, and the mind. So 11 commanders through which we enjoy this material world. The chariot on which Puranjana is sitting is this material body. The 5 swift horses that are driving the chariot are the 5 sense organs which drive the living entity towards different sense objects. And the forest named Panchaprastha is basically the environment of sense objects, this world, this material world, which has so many sense objects which we are drawn to. So Puranjana is ready to enter this forest. The 2 explosive arrows mean they refer to false ego characterized by the attitudes of aham mameti. Does anyone know what this aham mameti means? I and mine, me and mine, yes. Aham, I am this body, this is me, and mine, everything in relation to this body is mine. So this material conception are the 2 explosive arrows. 2 wheels of the chariot mean they signify the 2 paths of life one can take, the religious, spiritual path and the materialistic path. So 2 paths on which we balance our lives. And there are 3 flags on this chariot which denote the 3 modes of material nature, which guide all our activities. We are completely under the influence of the 3 modes, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, and they guide our activities. The 1 rein holding the horses, the rope, represents the mind. The mind controls the senses. And the chariot driver, intelligence, yes. And the chariot driver represents super soul, actually, Paramatma, who is guiding the chariot, guiding the living entity. The sitting place where Puranjana is sitting indicates the heart of the living entity, where the soul resides. And the 2 poles on the chariot represent lamentation and illusion, which bind the soul. Puranjana has 5 weapons, which again indicate the 5 senses used for interaction with the material world, and 7 coverings. The chariot has 7 coverings, which refer to the 7 layers of the human body, which is skin, muscle, fat, blood, marrow, bone, and semen. The chariot has 5 different styles of movement, which represents the 5 ways in which the senses interact with the sense objects. The nose smells, the eyes see, so on. And then there are 5 obstacles on the path of the chariot, which represents the 5 kinds of air in the body. The chariot is made of gold, which symbolizes the influence of passion, which drives people's activities. So this is the entire metaphor of Puranjana, the living entity, being encaged within this body, going for his journey of hunting animals, which means engaging in sense gratification activities, into the forest, which is the material world. So it is basically our position in this world, what we are doing, what we are engaged in. The 2 poles are lamentation and illusion. So in essence, this allegory illustrates how the living entity is influenced and driven by the senses, mind, and modes of material nature, leading to various material activities and experiences. And the purpose of this is to convey the complexities of material existence and the need for spiritual enlightenment to transcend these influences. Next translation.
It was almost impossible for King Puranjana to give up the company of his queen, even for a moment. Nonetheless, on that day, being very much inspired by the desire to hunt, he took up his bow and arrow with great pride and went to the forest, not caring for his wife.
Okay, can we stay there? It is very impossible for the king to give up the company of his wife. Nonetheless, on that day, being very much inspired by the desire to hunt, he took up his bow and arrow and basically left his wife. What does this mean? What? If you remember who is Puranjana and who is the wife, what's happening here? Can anyone? Yeah. So it was very difficult previously for him to give up his intelligence. He was very much under the influence. But now, because he is so inspired by the desire to hunt, which is basically, sorry? His mind is so inspired by the desire to enjoy this world, enjoy sense gratification now, that he gave up his intelligence and he left. So that's what we do also. It is said that when the mind is attracted to sense gratification, one should use their intelligence to control the mind, because the intelligence is higher than the mind, has a higher influence over the mind. And so sometimes when we are attracted by something, we use our intelligence. Is this good for me or is it not good for me? And then we make our decision. That is the ideal case. However, Puranjana was so disturbed by his desire that he gave up his intelligence. He left behind his wife. He took up his bow and arrow, which represent here, Prabhupada says, attachment and hatred, raga, dvesh. This is how we interact with material objects, attachment or hatred. I want this or I hate this. I really want this or I really don't want this. Duality, this is how we deal. So being influenced by this conception, he gave up his intelligence and went to satisfy his desires. Next translation.
At that time, King Puranjana was very much influenced by demoniac propensities. Because of this, his heart became very hard and merciless, and with sharp arrows he killed many innocent animals in the forest, taking no consideration.
His heart became really hard. He became merciless. Unrestricted. When one gives up their intelligence and is unrestrictedly chasing sense gratification, it makes one's heart hard. We become insensitive, we become merciless. Why? Because the whole desire is that I want to satisfy myself. It becomes very selfish. And when it becomes very selfish and I become the center, my satisfaction, my pleasure becomes the center. So then I stop caring about anyone else. So Puranjana, because he was following his mind, he was selfish, he wanted to enjoy himself, he became merciless, he stopped caring about others. He killed so many innocent animals in the forest. And in the purport, Prabhupada describes the effect or the harm basically of killing animals. He says, men do not understand that because they unrestrictedly kill so many animals, they also must be slaughtered like animals in big wars. This is very much evident in the Western countries. In the West, slaughterhouses are maintained without restriction, and therefore every 5th or 10th year there is a big war in which countless people are slaughtered, even more cruelly than the animals. Sometimes during war, soldiers keep their enemies in concentration camps and kill them in very cruel ways. These are reactions brought about by unrestricted animal killing in the slaughterhouse and by hunters in the forest. So this is the effects of animal killing. Sometimes we see wars, we see in the news, we see so many people died, and we tend to feel compassion. We tend to feel that so many people have been killed without their fault. So many innocent people have been tortured, have been killed. And we feel compassion, which is rightly so. We must, as devotees, feel compassion. But we don't see, we don't know what those people have done previously in this life or the previous life. How they may have tortured and killed animals for the satisfaction and taste of their own tongue. And the way that these animals are kept and tortured and killed is so abhorrent, is so horrible, that if we see some of the ways, there are so many documentaries, you can go and see in a slaughterhouse how animals are treated. And if we see, then we will realize that what's happening to some of these people, what happens is really something of their own doing. So this is what Prabhupada is saying, that we deserve equal punishment if we kill animals, if we act mercilessly, like Puranjana is doing here. Verse 26, verse number 6, the next verse, please. So this one we'll do the Sanskrit. Tirtheshu pratridrishteshu Raja Medhyan Pashunmane Yavadartham alam lubdho Hanyaditi niyam yate Tirtheshu pratridrishtetustu Raja Medhyan Pashunmane Yavadartham alam lubdho Hanyaditi niyam yate. Synonyms together. Tirtheshu, together, in holy places. Pratidrishteshu, according to the direction of the Vedas. Raja, a king. Medyan fit for sacrifice, Pashun animals, Vane in the forest, Yavat so much as Artham required, Alam not more than that, Labda being greedy, Hanyat one may kill, Iti thus Niyamyate it is regulated. Translation together. If a king is too attracted to eating flesh, he may, according to the directions of the revealed scriptures on sacrificial performances, go to the forest and kill some animals that are recommended for killing. One is not allowed to kill animals unnecessarily or without restrictions. The Vedas regulate animal killing to stop the extravagance of foolish men influenced by the modes of passion and ignorance. Can someone read the purport?
The question may be raised why a living being should be restricted in sense gratification. If a king to learn how to kill may go to the forest and kill animals, why should a living entity who has been given senses and not be allowed unrestricted sense gratification? At the present moment, this argument is put forward even by the so-called swamis and yogis who publicly say that because we have sense, we must satisfy them by sense gratification. This foolish swamis and yogis, however, do not know in the injunction of the Shastras. Indeed, sometimes the rascals come out to defy the Shastras. They even publicly announce that there should be no more Shastras, no more books. Just come to me, they say, and I shall touch you, and you will become immediately spiritually advanced. Because demonic people want to be cheated, so many cheaters are present to cheat them. At the present moment, in this age of Kali Yuga, the entire human society has become an assembly of cheaters and cheated. For the reason the Vedic scriptures have given the proper directions for sense gratification, everyone is inclined in the age to eat meat and fish, drink liquor, and indulge in sex life. According to the Vedic injunction, sex is allowed only in marriage. Meat eating is allowed only when the animal is killed and offered before goddess Kali. And intoxication is allowed only in a restricted way. In this verse, the word niyamyate indicates that all these things, namely animal killing, intoxication, and sex, should be godless. Regulations are meant for human beings, not for animals. And the traffic regulations on the street telling people to keep the right or left are meant the human beings, not for animals. If an animal violates such a law, punished, the human being is punished. The Vedas are not meant for the animals, but for understanding of the human society. A person who indiscriminately violates the rules and regulations given by the Vedas is eligible, liable to be punished. One should therefore not enjoy the sense according to the lusty desires, but should restrict himself according to the regulative principles given in the Vedas. If a king is allowed to hunt in the forest, it is not for sense gratification. We cannot simply experiment in the art of killing. If a king, being afraid to meet rogues and thieves, kill the poor animal and eats them and their flesh completely, comfortably at home, he must lose his position, and because in this age of kings have such demonic propensities, monarch is uplifted by the laws of nature, even in every country. People have become so degraded in the age that one hand has restricted polygamy, and on other hand, they hunt for women in so many ways. Many businesses, concerns, and publicly adversities. And these topless girls are available at the club or shop. Thus, women have become instruments of sense enjoyment, and in the modern society, the Vedas enjoin, however, that if a man has the propensity to enjoy more than one wife, as sometimes the propensity of a man in higher social order, such as the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas, even sometimes the Shudras. He is allowed to marry more than one wife. Marriage means taking complete charge of a woman and living peacefully without debauchery at the present moment. However, debauchery is in unrestricted. Nonetheless, society makes a law that one should not marry more than one wife. The typical of a demonic society.
Wonderful. Thank you. At the beginning of this purport, Srila Prabhupada brings up a very interesting question, that why should a living entity who has been given senses not be allowed unrestricted sense gratification? So if we have senses, and if the senses desire and enjoy pleasure, why not engage in unrestricted sense gratification? And so the entire purport is basically an answer to that question, that regulation is needed. That human life, human birth is the highest form of life on this planet. And it is only in human life that we have the opportunity to ask important questions, to act in a way that we can attain the goal of life, which is self-realization. Know who is God, know who am I. So when we are given a human body, and if we still use it as animals do, which is unrestricted sense enjoyment, even animals actually have restrictions, they have a regulated lifestyle. But if we act worse than animals, then we will be under the laws of nature and we will be punished because we are not using this body responsibly. And therefore, the entire point is that not that we need to completely give up all acts of sense enjoyment. That is not possible, that is not practical, and therefore the point is regulation. That's why in the translation also it is mentioned that animal killing, Narad Muni is not saying that one must completely give up, but one must regulate it based on the Shastras. And for us, what it means is that our activities in this life, our actions of sense gratification should be regulated based on Shastras, based on the injunctions of Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam. We should act in a restricted way because that will help us remember the goal of life and not get deviated. The next 3 translations, 4. Seven to 10. Yeah, we can.
Narada Muni continued to speak with King Prachina Bharisha. My dear king, any person who works according to the directions of the Vedic scriptures does not become involved in fruitive activities. Otherwise, a person who acts whimsically falls down due to false prestige. Thus, he becomes involved in laws of nature, which are composed of 3 qualities: goodness, passion, ignorance. In this way, a living entity becomes devoid of his real intelligence, becomes perpetually lost in the cycle of birth and death. Thus, he goes up and down from a microbe in stool to high position in the Brahmaloka planet. When King Puranjana was hunting in this way, many animals within the forest lost their lives with great pain, pierced by the sharp arrowheads. Upon seeing this devastating, ghastly activities performed by the king, all the people who were merciful by nature became very unhappy. Seeing such merciful persons could not tolerate seeing all this killing. In this way, King Puranjana killed many animals, including rabbits, boars, buffalo, bison, black deer, porcupines, and other game animals. After killing, the king became very tired.
Wonderful. Thank you. In the purport of verse number 10, Srila Prabhupada says, it is said that the killers of animals should neither live nor die. And again, we all are in a way killers of animals in the sense of this story, because we are all hunting sense gratification. We are all hunting pleasure, objects of these senses. So this applies to all of us. It is said that the killers of animals should neither live nor die. If they live only to kill animals and enjoy women, life is not very prosperous. So if we live only for sense gratification, it is a waste. And as soon as a killer dies, he enters the cycle of birth and death in the lower species of life, which will happen to us. If we die enjoying sense gratification, we will get a lower birth according to our karma. That is also not desirable. The conclusion is that killers should retire from the killing business and take to this Krishna consciousness movement to make life perfect. A confused, frustrated man cannot get relief by committing suicide, because suicide will simply lead him to take birth in the lower species of life, or to remain a ghost, unable to attain a gross material body. Therefore, the perfect course is to retire altogether from sinful activities and take up Krishna consciousness. In this way, one can become completely perfect and go back home, back to Godhead. So this is the entire reason why Narad Muni is instructing Prachina Parishad, to instruct him that please stop killing animals, please stop this business of sense gratification. This will lead you nowhere. To explain his position in this material world and to give him instructions to please take up to spiritual life and save himself. That was our discussion for today. Any questions or comments, please? Ante.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for the Srimad Bhagavatam class today. What is the correct usage of the false ego sense?
What is the correct usage of the false ego? Well, the false ego itself is, it says, false. So the real ego, basically, is what needs to be used and revived. The false ego is false sense of identification, me and mine. This is me, my body, and everything related to the body is mine. So that false sense of ownership, pride, is the false ego. The real ego is the real consciousness. What am I? I'm the spirit soul, not this body. Servant of Krishna, associate of Krishna. So therefore, that is my reality, and that is, and nothing related to this body or this world is mine. You know, my purpose is to serve. So that is the real ego. So one needs to transition from false to real ego, revive the real consciousness. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And just to give further context, I was asking because in our story today, we were speaking of how Parijana, Puranjana was using, he was with the allegory of the chariot and everything, and we spoke about the queen representing intelligence, and there was the mind and the senses, and I was just curious of what would be the correct usage of the false ego, and your response was to transition, make sure that it stays in the true state.
Yes, give up the false ego and revive the real ego. And that happens through the process of bhakti and through practice of detachment. Yes, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
So my question was, we're talking about the queen being his material intelligence, and because he was too attached to sense gratification, he gave up even his material intelligence. In the previous chapter, there was mention of yogis not having a wife, so basically not operating on material intelligence. So then we are to assume that they have spiritual intelligence. And so here is the wife to be considered with material, like, ultimately, even this is not good because she couldn't prevent him from falling further.
Yeah, yes. In this story, the wife mentions, a wife represents specifically the material intelligence. And Prabhupada mentions in a purport in the previous chapter that one should act with spiritual intelligence and not with material intelligence. So, yeah, we can see that his material intelligence could not save him from being captivated by the forest of material enjoyment. In fact, it led him there in some ways. So therefore, Prabhupada says that one should use one's spiritual intelligence, which basically comes through cultivation of knowledge and detachment and practice of bhakti, association. He mentions these points. These are the ways to revive one's spiritual intelligence. Okay, I think we can end a few minutes early if there are no other questions. Thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.